Hey, welcome NFL football fans. It is time again for NFL Football Talk. I'm your host, Charles E. Smith Jr. This is an Inside Sports production presented by Humanica Media. And here we are. The NFL regular season is over, and it is time for Wild Card Weekend. Hope everyone had a fantastic Christmas and New Year's, and here we're ready to start 2018, and we'll see which team will be hoisting that Lombardi Trophy. And the journey starts this weekend with Wild Card Weekend, 8 teams, 4 NFC, 4 AFC, and we'll see how it all shakes out. So as you know, I do not do this show alone. I do enlist the help of the very, very best, and always proud to introduce my co-host, the man many of you already follow on Twitter at Chris L Sports, and that's at CHRIS, the letter L, and then Sports, and follow him for his words of wisdom. Just a terrific dude, my favorite East Coast intellectual, proud grad of Rutgers University. Here is the main man from somewhere in an undisclosed location in Southern California. I've never actually been to his crib. Okay. Chris Lardieri. Chris, what's happening out there, man?
Charles, thank you as always. Happy New Year to you and our loyal followers out there. And don't take it personal. I like to think of it as a bunker of sorts. I guess I'm kind of like Tim Allen's neighbor in Home Improvement, right? I really see the house.
Yeah, there you go. So, you know what? This last weekend, though, and I got to just say, all you Baltimore Ravens fans out there, not necessarily the players, but the fans, you know, I'd like to give you a nice warm hug from all of us here at Inside Sports. I know you just need that. You were so close to the playoffs, less than a minute away. You had the hated Cincinnati Bengals, 4th and 12 with less than a minute to play. One play away from the playoffs. One play. All you had to do was stop them from getting a first down. Anything. What do? Give up a 48-yard touchdown. And John Harbaugh, his look of horror on the sidelines, because you go from the whole thing of talking about the playoffs. And, you know, the other thing that goes, other than the disappointment of missing the playoffs by that narrow margin, is the press conference that you were mentally preparing for is now just going to be horrible. Just horrible. Chris, what did you think when you saw that? We're not Ravens fans, but just for the love of sports, I mean, you got to feel for them.
A colossal choke job. I mean, in the locker room after the game, there were grown men crying. That says a lot about what happened. And if memory serves me correctly, a number of years ago, the Ravens had like a 4th and 22 or something against the Chargers that they converted to keep their season alive. So I guess the football gods are getting even with them. But when you consider, too, this was so bad that a man who essentially a gun put to his head and told Adam Schefter he was resigning after this year, ended up getting a contract extension out of it. Marvin Lewis, Ives, and any of the cats I know. Amazing. They beat the Lions, and they just completely sucked the life out of the Ravens in a big upset, and the guy gets to keep his job. So many storylines there. I mean, and ultimately Flacco not getting the job done too. I mean, let's call it like we see it. He played pretty well down the stretch, but this guy makes a lot of money, and to get paid that much money, you're in the elite upper echelon type of quarterback in the NFL. To the Bengals, and you control your own playoff destiny.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I heard actually, and you know, this is the first time I heard this because I was watching that network that just shows endless. I think it's called Empty Stats Prove Nothing, something like that. I think that's the call letters. But they were saying, I guess out there in Twitterverse or something, they're calling him Joe Fluco. Do you know about that? Because it was a fluke that he won that only Super Bowl he won. What do you think about that?
No, I like that. Yeah, that's actually a good one. And, you know, I think while we discuss the merits of that name, why don't we set up a fake debate between you and I? I could be the one who doesn't like the name, and you can like it, and we'll just yell and scream at each other and get ratings.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll do that next week. And, you know, I got to wonder, though, when you look at that whole Ohio area, there you got Marvin Lewis, who's been there for 15 years, 0-7 in the playoffs, 0-7. And then just a little ways up the road there, you've got Hugh Jackson, who coaching the Cleveland Browns. Now, how in the world? I didn't even think it was possible to not improve upon a 1-15 season, but somehow they did it. So the Cleveland Browns go from 1-15, return the same group with a number 1 draft pick, and go 0-16. And now next year, everybody, remember, they will be drafting number 1 and number 4 in the draft. My theory is this. In Pittsburgh, which is the city of champions, in Pittsburgh, the Monongahela and the Allegheny River meet to form the Ohio River, which flows through, and there must be something toxic in that mix that flows through down there into the Cincinnati and Cleveland area. Pittsburgh sucks up all the good stuff, and then everything else just flows down there and just poisons the football cities in Ohio. Any other explanation?
Yeah, I mean, maybe they suck out all the mineral common sense content out of the water, and it never makes its way to Cleveland. But I mean, I look, you know me, I'm pretty loquacious. I'm at a loss for words when it comes to the Browns. These guys turn over their front office more than anyone too, and they hire a new GM. The Paul DePodesta Moneyball model must not be working, and yet the coach keeps his job. I mean, I really don't understand. I thought Marvin Lewis was a head scratcher. This is unreal. And Jackson's almost adamant about how to hear him talk, you would think he did a good job considering the talent he was given and coached them up to one less win this year. My kids asked me once, they said, "Dad, why are the Browns so bad?" And I really had no good reason. I couldn't explain why, other than the fact that it's ineptitude from the top down and it continues. And look, yeah, they have 2 of the top 4 picks, but look what they've done the last few years. The quarterbacks they've passed on. Who's to say their draft picks will even materialize? I mean, come on, Deshaun Watson or Kaiser, no brainer. Well, the Browns made a science out of that, passing on Goff and Wentz. I don't know who the Mel Kiper and the rest of the draft aficionados think is a top pick, but it doesn't matter because the Browns will screw it up, and it makes me optimistic to be a Giants fan for once in 2017.
Yeah, that's true. And there are other first-round picks they've passed on in quarterbacks recent years. They could have had Deshaun Watson, could have had Carson Wentz. They could have had Teddy Bridgewater. They could have had Aaron Rodgers. They could have had Ben Roethlisberger. They could have had Donovan McNabb. It's just, when you go back all the way to 1999, it's just incredible. And I think the problem has to be the front office, because if it was as simple as the coaching or as simple as the GM, they would have fixed that. So the problems are higher, and I think everyone knows that, because when you've got management willing to leave a coach out there who's just getting progressively worse, 1-15 to 0-16, and he's still not the problem, I think there's just a high level of dysfunction. And one of the things they were discussing on another show was they said it's hard to go 0-16 because you're going to run into a team that's flat at some point, and you got to win a game or 2 by accident. And they can't even do that.
Yeah, they couldn't beat the Bears, who were so horrible they fired their coach. They couldn't beat the Steelers, who all but sat their top 10 players. What gives? I mean, and, getting back to the front office, these are the guys who hire the coaches, but yet every year the coaching carousel, the numbers get bigger and bigger on Black Monday or Dark Sunday or whatever the case is if they're the last regular season game. But these so-called experts hire these coaches and then fire them, not realizing they're the problem. And it goes back to the drum I was beating. And I know it's come and gone, but Jerry Reese hired Ben McAdoo. Jerry Reese drafted guys that didn't pan out. So I give the Giants credit for firing him and McAdoo at the same time, because he was just as guilty as McAdoo for what happened this season. And I also don't understand why the owner of the Browns would let someone, Paul DePodesta, whose claim to fame is Jonah Hill, played him in Moneyball, and DePodesta wouldn't let him use his name in the movie. Somehow his analytics would work in the NFL. Well, look, I'm a numbers guy. I get it. But how does that translate to football? It's clearly not working. You've won 1 game in the last 2 years. So how does he still have a job?
Right, 1-31 over 2 seasons. So just to go over the coaches that are out, and I had to put Marvin Lewis back on the list. I had him on my out list, but I had to put him back on right before it went on air. So John Fox is out in Chicago. Chuck Pagano is out in Indianapolis. And then Bruce Arians has retired in Arizona. And by the way, Carson Palmer announced his retirement too, the quarterback for the Cardinals. So it looks like they may be headed for some type of nuclear winter out there in the desert. Jack Del Rio can, by Al Davis's little boy right after they lost. You know what? I think that was cool, though, to can him right after the loss on Sunday because it was New Year's Eve. You got Ken. Now you can go out, you can party, tie one on, and not even worry about anything the next day. Next day, sleep it off, watch football games or whatever. Jim Caldwell is out in Detroit. And as we mentioned, Ben McAdoo already out as the Giants head coach. So a lot of vacancies there. So, hey, who knows? But I think other coaches you got to take a look at, though, at some point. Jay Gruden in Washington and John Harbaugh in Baltimore, although he does just enough. And then Jason Garrett in Dallas. Is he one of those guys who is he just going to be able to go 9-7, 10-6 every year because they show promise? Is that Jason Garrett in a nutshell?
Apparently so. When you look at the previous Dallas coaches, he's actually quite successful, and he's kind of a rah-rah guy on the sideline, and sure Jerry doesn't have to pay him as much as, say, a John Gruden would cost. So, I think as long as they don't go 0-16, he'll keep his job. That's another head scratcher there. And how about Dirk Cutter in Tampa? I mean, I thought he was all but gone, and the Bucs were going to make a run at Gruden, and he kept his job with a team that literally quit on them during the season. So that's another head scratcher.
Well, the Bucs played okay the last couple of weeks, and they did wind up beating New Orleans in the last game of the season. But, that's just kind of we'll get into the games, the wild card games this weekend, which all of them have huge point spreads, which are scary if you were in Vegas. I would say just stay away from all of them. Just sit back and enjoy the games. But before we get into the pick segment, Mr. Lardieri, what have you got for us this week? I know you always got a little football wisdom you'd like to share with everybody.
Absolutely. Another drum I've beaten over the years, I'm sure you're tired of hearing about, is John Gruden's awful work on Monday Night Football. And it appears as though it may be coming to an end. The only thing we'll be able to complain about on Monday nights on ESPN is the mediocre matchup the NFL set the network up with. But we've said it for years. The guy said nothing. He rarely ripped anyone other than I think he criticized Eric Flowers during a Monday night game this year because he was that incompetent. So it looks like he's going to come back and coach the Raiders. Eventually they'll be the Vegas Raiders. I know a lot of Raider fans are excited, but this guy's been out of the game for a while, and I think he's going into a fairly volatile situation there, especially in the locker room. You got some real characters and personalities there, and a lot of rumblings coming out of the Bay Area that Derek Carr wasn't well liked by his offensive line, and Marshawn Lynch may have stirred things up this year. So don't think Chucky's going to bring you a Super Bowl right away. I think there's a lot of work to be done in Oakland. That was a team that really had a nice year last year, but Derek Carr's regressed. And then kind of hand in hand with that, something I've been monitoring is Sean Payton with the Saints. If the Saints don't advance in the playoffs, Charles, you think these rumors stir up again that he wants out in New Orleans and he realized it might be the end of the run with he takes a pay cut? That's just something that kind of piqued my interest. I don't know what you thought.
I don't know. And then maybe Sean Payton winds up back in New York to coach the Giants, that's where he cut his teeth as an assistant.
Complaining. I like that theory.
There we go. So, hey, remember, Penn State, I know we don't talk college, but, Saquon Barkley, the running back, is declared for the draft. Mr. Lardieri, the Cleveland Browns get you on the line. Should they take Saquon Barkley?
Here's the thing. There's a lot of time that'll pass between now and the combine, and guys will get put through the proverbial meat grinder. But I don't know if they go just because they have that 4 pick, and seeing as the Giants are in front of them and they may want a quarterback, they may be able to wait until 4. I think Barkley's a great talent, but even in this new era where running backs are kind of coming back into fashion, I don't think you take a top pick on a running back. I think maybe they wait a little while. But just from what I've seen him in college, he looks like a phenomenal talent. And Elliott's done in Dallas. A team will take a fairly high first-round pick on him, I predict.
There we go. But I'll tell everybody and every team out there, every GM, beware of Penn State running backs. That's all I have to say about it. I have nothing against as an institution of higher learning, and you can give me a linebacker out of Penn State any day of the week. But Penn State running backs, buyer beware.
Yeah, I think the last really good one was Kurt Warner, and not the quarterback for the Rams.
I do remember him played for the Seahawks.
You got it.
Okay. All right, everybody. So let's get into it. The picks of the week. We got 4 games. The wild card weekend begins at approximately 1:35 on Saturday kickoff, and that'll be the Tennessee Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll go ahead and break down these games. And by the way, we keep score every week. Normally we pick 5 games. Last couple of weeks we picked 3. But anyhow, on the season with our picks, we are dead even now. I am 40-30 on the season. Mr. Lardieri is 40-30. And now we go into the first weekend of what will be the most critical 11 games of the season, with a Super Bowl champion emerging at the end. So, Mr. Lardieri, why don't you go ahead and break down that first game for us?
Yeah, the typical dud game of Wild Card Weekend, a.k.a. the game Sean McDonough and John Gruden always get to call. For once, it doesn't involve the Houston Texans. They had a rough year this year. It seems like forever they would call that game. But, look, I think the Titans are fortunate to even get into the playoffs. I know Mariota had a nice game against the Jaguars last week, but that was a team that really didn't have a heck of a lot to play for. And going into Kansas City, while I don't think the Chiefs are that much superior to the Titans, I do think they're a better all-around team. I think since Andy Reid's relegated the play calling, Alex Smith, Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce have all kind of gotten the fire lit under them again. I like the way the offense is playing, and the Titans running game, I don't think Marcus Mariota is going to beat you. I'll pick the Chiefs at home.
Yeah, there you go. Even though the Chiefs had an up and down season, remember they started off winning their first 4 games of the year, looked like world beaters. Then they lost 2. Then they won 1. Then they lost 4 straight, so basically lost 6 out of 7. But then they end the season by winning their last 4 games, and it looks like all is right with the world. I think the one thing is, and then Tennessee had lost 3 straight. Then they come up big against Jacksonville. But when I look at this, I would be tempted, if you wanted to look at any chance of an upset, you really got to look at DeMarco Murray being healthy. DeMarco Murray, running back for the Tennessee Titans. He's been out with that MCL, and he may play this week. I guess expected to play. Even if he does, he's not going to be 100%. He's going to have to gut it out. And there's too much explosiveness on the side of Kansas City. So I'm saying that I don't think that Tennessee can put up enough points to beat Kansas City. Kansas City can get the big plays. They can take the top off the defense. They got a great run game. So I think unless I see Tennessee would need to put up 28 points at least to win this game, and I just don't see them doing that. I'm going with KC.
And we agree again. No, nothing's going to break this stalemate, is it?
Okay, then staying with the AFC, we're going to go to the Sunday game. This will be the early game on Sunday, but it is a 10:05 start. The Buffalo Bills, who were singing and dancing in the locker room when they watched Cincinnati complete that 48-yard touchdown pass to beat the Ravens, which put the Bills in the playoffs for the first time, I believe, since the Music City Miracle, if my memory serves. Yes. So, yeah, they're back in the playoffs, even though they were a minus 57 in point differential on the season. But they're playing against Jacksonville. Jacksonville winning the AFC South. So Jacksonville, when you look at point differential, they were a plus 149 for the year. So pretty good. But Jacksonville hasn't looked that great in recent weeks. I would love to pick an upset here with Buffalo. And I think they would have a decent shot at it, at least a good puncher's chance to win this game if Shady McCoy was healthy. But he's not. That ankle is going to make him a game-time decision. And even if he does play, remember, you got a juke and cut on a bad ankle against the Jacksonville defense, which is a great defense. So I just don't think Buffalo can get it done. They're an 8-point underdog. And, yeah, I got to go with Jacksonville here. If Shady was healthy, I think the Bills might have a legitimate chance at the upset, though. But he's not, so I'm going Jacksonville.
Yeah, I completely agree with you for all those reasons, Charles. And it's unfortunate because McCoy's been an excellent back in this league, and seeing back in the playoffs, it's too bad he hurt his ankle. I hope he can go, but even if he does, he's not 100%. I think the key for Jacksonville is to keep the ball out of Blake Bortles' hands. You don't want him throwing the ball. He's come to rear his ugly head again the past few weeks with untimely interceptions. Pound the ball with Fournette, let your defense win the game for you, and move on to the next round. I'm picking the Jaguars as well.
Yep. Okay, there we go. And we got football out here in Southern California, a NFL playoff game in Southern Cal. Well, this part of Southern Cal. I don't mean San Diego is the unincorporated portion of Southern California. I mean the real Southern California, which is here, the coast, LA area. So break this one down for us, Mr. Lardieri.
Yeah, a lot of excitement here. Rams last year, everyone was really down on them. Jeff Fisher gets run out of town, and what a difference a year makes. They get to host a playoff game against the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons with a big win to get into the playoffs last week over the Panthers. Watching that game, I think about the same things I've been saying all season. Matt Ryan and Julio Jones just can't seem to get it right. I point the finger at Steve Sarkisian. I don't know what that offense is doing. They clearly missed Kyle Shanahan. There are a lot of times it could easily got in the end zone, and Carolina held them to field goals. I think the Rams' defense is stout. I've kind of been flying under the radar, other than to those of us in the know out here in LA area, but I think they shut it down. And even if Jones gets his yards, I think Matt Ryan not playing at the same capacity he was last year. I think Todd Gurley, who probably should be MVP but won't, because we all know Tom Brady will inevitably get it. I think he makes a difference here, not only running the ball, but as a pass catcher all year. He's going to drive that Atlanta defense nuts. My son keeps asking me to go to the game. Remains to be seen if we can find tickets. There's a kind viewer or listener out there who knows where I can get some without paying the exorbitant Ticketmaster fees. Tweet me at Chris L Sports. Thank you. I'm picking the Rams.
All right. And so, well, with Atlanta, I like Atlanta's defense is pretty good here. The Rams, though, and with the Rams defense, I'd say this: Julio Jones against the Rams secondary, that could be a matchup that the Falcons may be able to exploit. But the reason why I don't think they will be able to is because of the front seven of the Rams, and in particular, Mr. Donald up there up front. So it's going to be up to the front line of the Rams to get a good push and make sure that they don't give Ryan the time that he needs to find any receivers downfield. And other than that, I like the Rams offense, highest scoring offense in the league. So highest scoring offense against Atlanta. Atlanta ability to put up points, but like you said, they haven't really done it this year. I'm going with the Rams to advance in the playoffs after having what's the first Rams playoff game in Southern California since what, 1990? Something like that. In Southern Cal, anyways. 89.
Yeah. Yep, that's true. Oh, I remember the Flipper Anderson game, but that was at the Meadowlands. I bad memories from that.
Okay, so we're both going with the Rams on that game. And then the last game of the weekend. Now, there's the Rams game. That's a 5:15 start on Saturday night, everybody. 5:15 out here on the West Coast. And 1:40 on Sunday is the other NFC wildcard game. We're going to have the Panthers in New Orleans to take on the New Orleans Saints. The Panthers, that game that they played last week was troubling. It was. Cam Newton, I think, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. And that was a game that they needed, too. I know they had locked up a playoff spot, but had they won that game, this game would be in Carolina. They would not have to go on the road to play in New Orleans and go into that hostile Superdome there and try to take on the Saints. So and the Saints have had their problems as well with consistency. But when it comes right down to it, when you got Cam Newton, who hasn't been able to get on the same page with those receivers the way that he should, I take Drew Brees and that two-headed monster in the backfield with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara have been consistent all year long. So I think that'll be the difference in the game here. I'm taking New Orleans at home to boot Carolina.
I'm going to agree with you. I really don't like the way Carolina has been playing, specifically Cam Newton. I don't think their receivers are up to par. The running game's never really gotten off the ground. That said, Drew Brees really hasn't had to throw a heck of a lot this year.
Right.
If the Panthers can successfully stop that two-headed monster, which they may be able to, they've beaten them once this year, they've got themselves a chance to win this game. Ultimately, though, I think if they do that, Drew Brees can exploit the Carolina secondary at any point. I mean, Michael Thomas is really an up-and-coming receiver that I like. I wouldn't be surprised if he is a scorer, a big game here. But that said, while I do go with the Saints, it wouldn't surprise me if it's a close game. These two always seem to play games where one team hangs around or it comes down to a field goal differential. Right. But that said, I think a lot of people are talking about the Saints maybe being a dark horse to kind of move on and upset someone else in the second round. So they do indeed win. Remains to be seen. It could be an interesting next round of the playoffs for the New Orleans Saints and potentially Drew Brees in his last run with the team.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, I like the Saints. Now, the only thing is, remember, Carolina's defense is stout. So if they can stop that run, and it's going to be up to that front seven of Carolina. I think that's where the game is going to be won and lost is right there. They're going to have to keep them off the scoreboard. If they get into if they get into a point where they have to really outscore the Saints, it's game over. It's game over. So hold the Saints to under 30 points, and I think they got a chance, maybe. But, yeah, I'm taking New Orleans also, but just some food for thought, a little strategy there for Mr. Rivera as he talks with his boys this week. You cannot let this turn into a track meet. If it turns into a track meet, Carolina will get run out of the building, guaranteed. They're going to have to make it muck and grind and ugly, and then they got a chance.
Definitely, and they got to play field possession too. They can't have the New Orleans offense on the field that long. It'll wear them down.
Yep, absolutely. So there's the 4 games. I hope everybody enjoys Wild Card Weekend. And remember, you can follow me on Twitter at @BeInsideSports. Follow Chris on Twitter at ChrisLSports. That's at CHRIS, the letter L, Sports. Okay, so before we get on out of here, Chris, you have some final words for us.
Yeah, definitely. You and I talked about this before the show. I'm going to give my public service announcement of the week. I wouldn't really bet on any of these games. I know I like to pick underdogs throughout the season. There isn't one that stood out to me. If anything, I know people are going to ask me, well, give me one. Well, I guess Carolina in some spots are getting 6.5, 7 points. If you can get that, I say take it because I do think they'll lose. They tend to keep these games close, and if it does turn into a slugfest, I think that would benefit them point spread wise. But I do not feel confident enough about it to go on the record for Gambler's Delight. So that said, my final thought, New Year's Day, watching the semifinal games for the championship, watching that classic Georgia-Oklahoma game back and forth, and it just reminds me. I've talked to a lot of people, and besides the political issues or the fact that concussions are so rampant or stars get hurt, I think at the end of the day, a lot of people enjoy watching college football more because of that. There's a lot of action. I noticed at one point during the game, there seemed to be so few penalties that stuck out to me. And you don't see that in an NFL game. When I saw pass interference called yesterday at the Rose Bowl, it was legitimate pass interference. And another thing, when there is a pass interference in college, it's only 15 yards, not, throw the ball up there 50 yards and hope it gets down to the spot of the foul. But anyway, I think longer term, the NFL needs to look at this. The style of play in college is a lot more wide open. I know there's more schools. The talent is spread a little more evenly, but it just is a more interesting game to watch. I don't feel like every single play is reviewed. And look, I love the NFL, but I mean, this was just kind of one of those outlier years where some of these games are really hard to watch. So be interesting to see what kind of ratings the game's got. I haven't gotten yet, but I'm hoping the NFL playoffs here in January of 2018 prove me wrong. But looking at Wild Card Weekend, I'm not quite sure. There aren't a heck of a lot of intriguing matchups, but I've got to hand it to college football. They got a good product. I mean, even watching some of these other bowl games like Central Florida and Auburn, who would have expected UCF to win? So some really good storylines in college, and I don't have any solutions for Mr. Goodell on how to fix that other than the fact that games just seem to drag on like watching a baseball playoff game with their incessant visits to the mound and pitching changes, etc. So there's some food for thought for you.
All right. And, of these 4 games coming up this weekend, honestly, I'm going to watch 2 of them. I'll watch the Rams and Atlanta. I'll watch Carolina, New Orleans, at least turn it on, see what happens. But I got to admit, I kind of went to the dark side this past weekend. I decided to become a follower and not really watch the guy. Follow the scores on my phone and everything, and kept up with the drama. But you know what? I got to say, I understand you followers. I still despise following, but I understand it. I almost caught the following bug. So I was able to do whatever I wanted and not be locked down to the TV set for 3 hours watching a game. And I followed all the drama right there on my wireless device. Wireless devices must be stopped. That's all I can say. The temptation is too great, man, to become a follower. I don't want to become a follower.
Oh, it is. But I mean, for us, we were coming back from San Diego, and all I could do was watch it on a phone. And I was thinking, geez, when I was my son's age, I'd have a Walkman and listen to the radio or hope the All Sports or All News station gave scoring updates a little more frequently than I would have liked. But yeah, I mean, I flipping around on the Sunday Ticket app, I could flip from game to game, or even when I was out and didn't have a good signal, I could look at the NFL app and see what was going on. I mean, I don't blame kids nowadays for being like that. It's a great world when it comes to technology, and some of these games are boring. Go out and enjoy the day. And we live in the 10% of the country that isn't below freezing right now. So go out and enjoy the warm weather and track that game on your phone, Charles.
Yeah, I agree. And that was one thing I was pointing out to when I was talking to some of the youngins about this, was that, back in our day, even if you were going to listen on the radio, on the transistor radio, you still, if you went to the bathroom or something and you were listening on the radio, maybe you flushed right when they were doing a scoring update, you would miss that. And you'd have to wait, 5 or 10 minutes and hope that they did that scoring update again. Now, everything is right there on demand. And did he say 15 or 18? Did he say 21-0 or 21-10? Stuff like that. But now it's right there for you. So, hey, we're out of here. Everybody loves football, no matter how you follow it, whether you follow it, watch it, or play fantasy football. I'm Charles E. Smith, Jr. So for Mr. Chris Lardieri, enjoy the game. We'll see everybody next week on NFL Football Talk. This is an Inside Sports production, and thank you for watching/listening.